The obsidian dais, suspended in the heart of the conclave's grand chamber, seemed to drink the light. It was a platform of absolute black, a singularity in the vast, vaulted space whose crystalline ceiling shimmered with the captured light of 1,000 suns, each a member world of the Galactic Compact. Upon this dais sat the triumvirate, the three highest arbiters of a civilization that spanned a third of the galaxy. Their forms were as different as the stars they represented. The crystalline entity of the Xylos, whose thoughts echoed in chimes of pure logic, the amorphous, ever-shifting Githar, a being of collective consciousness and deep empathic currents, and the Cathar Imperator, a creature of chitin and ancient, unyielding tradition, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the myriad faces of the delegates assembled below. Silence, heavy and profound, filled the chamber. It was a silence born not of peace, but of a tension so thick it felt like a physical pressure, a weight upon the soul of every being present. For weeks, this silence had been their true ruler, punctuated only by whispers of a ghost, a myth resurrected from the forgotten annals of cosmic history. Before them, a holographic sphere of the galaxy turned with majestic slowness, its spiral arms a river of jewels. At its very edge, in a desolate, unremarkable sector designated by the dusty archives as the Orion Arm, a single star system pulsed with a soft, insistent blue light. Sol, a name that was both a footnote and a legend. A name that had not been spoken with any real significance in the hallowed halls of the conclave for time beyond memory. It was the cradle of a species known only as humans, a race that had vanished from the galactic stage so long ago they were now less than a memory, more akin to a theological concept. A cautionary tale whispered to younglings about the hubris of rapid expansion and sudden, inexplicable disappearance. They had been a flicker, a brief, bright spark that had illuminated a tiny corner of the void, and then just as quickly had been extinguished. All that remained were their silent, dead worlds, tombs of incomprehensible artifacts that had defied the Compact's greatest minds for millennia. And now, after 500,000 years of perfect, unbroken silence, a signal had emerged from their tomb. "It cannot be," the Cathar Imperator's voice rasped, a sound like stone grinding on stone, breaking the chamber's oppressive stillness. "The archives are clear. The progenitors themselves witnessed their end. The human sphere of influence collapsed in upon itself. Their worlds went dark. Their starfaring vessels, scattered across the void, fell silent one by one. There was no cataclysm, no war, no plague that our chronologists could identify, only a great and sudden emptiness. To suggest they have returned is to suggest a star can be rekindled from its own ashes." He gestured with a bladed forelimb toward the pulsing blue light, a gesture of dismissal, yet his multifaceted eyes remained fixed upon it, a flicker of something ancient and deep, not quite fear, but a profound and unsettling uncertainty, betraying his rigid posture. From the amorphous, swirling form of the Githar, a voice emerged not as a sound but as a wave of shared feeling, a current of thought that washed over every delegate. And yet the signal persists. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is structured, deliberate. It carries the elegant, symmetrical mathematics that was the hallmark of their ancient broadcasts. It is a greeting, a key, an invitation. We feel its intent. It is serene. The Githar's collective consciousness pulsed with a gentle, curious warmth, a stark contrast to the Imperator's harsh skepticism. They were a species of empaths, and to them, the signal was not a threat, but a mystery that sang a song of profound loneliness and patience. It was a whisper from a ghost, but a ghost that did not seem to bear them any ill will. The crystalline Xylos, Voxel Primus, remained inert, its faceted body refracting the starlight from the ceiling into 1,000 tiny rainbows. When it finally spoke, its voice was the sound of harmonic resonance, each word a perfectly formed crystal of logic. "Probability dictates that the Cathar Imperator's assessment is the most likely. The biological entity known as human is extinct. The half-life of their civilization's energy signatures expired 470,000 standard cycles ago. Their artifacts, while technologically intriguing, show no signs of recent activation. The simplest explanation is that this is an automated system, a dead-hand protocol finally triggering after an eon of dormancy, a final, meaningless echo from a vanished people." The logic was cold, precise, and for many in the chamber, deeply comforting. An echo was not a return. A ghost was not a living thing. But the comfort was thin, a fragile veneer over a chasm of the unknown. The legends of the humans were contradictory. Some ancient tales, passed down from the progenitor species who had briefly encountered them, spoke of a race of unparalleled ferocity and ambition, a fire that had threatened to consume the stars before it mysteriously burned itself out. They were described as conquerors, as warriors whose technological ascent was terrifyingly steep. Other fragments, however, painted a different picture. They spoke of artists, philosophers, and explorers, of a species that possessed a strange and powerful duality, an immense capacity for both creation and destruction. They were a paradox, a people who built monuments to peace while perfecting weapons of utter annihilation. Their disappearance was the greatest enigma in the Galactic Codex, and their silence had, over the millennia, become a kind of unspoken foundation for the current age of peace. The compact had risen in their wake, built upon the ruins of their abandoned outposts, and its primary unspoken directive had always been to never repeat the mistakes of the fiery, unpredictable species that had come before. An echo, the Cathar Imperator scoffed, his gaze sweeping across the delegates. An echo that has bypassed every layer of our most sophisticated sensor nets, a dead hand that has sliced through encryption protocols that have kept this compact secure for 100 millennia. No, this is not the work of a decaying machine. This is a deliberate act. It is a challenge, a declaration. He leaned forward, his shadow falling long and sharp across the obsidian dais. They were arrogant. The progenitors said so. They believed themselves to be the inheritors of the cosmos. It is more likely they did not vanish but retreated, hid themselves away in their cradle system, hoarding their power, watching, waiting. And now they have decided the time is right to emerge. The Gethar's emotional field rippled with a soft dissent. Your fear colors your perception, Imperator. The signal does not feel like a challenge, it feels like a key, a solution to a problem we do not yet understand. We have studied the remnants of their culture, their art, their music. It speaks of a deep and abiding sorrow, a profound sense of cosmic isolation. They were a people who felt everything with a terrible intensity. Perhaps their disappearance was not an act of arrogance but of despair, or perhaps it was an act of transcendence. Transcendence is a comforting myth for a species that fears its own mortality, Voxel Primus chimed, its crystalline logic cutting through the Gethar's empathic wave. The data is insufficient to support such a hypothesis. What we know is this: a signal of unknown purpose and capacity originates from the Sol system. It exhibits technological signatures that are, paradoxically, both archaic and impossibly advanced. It is a logical contradiction, and it must be investigated. The compact cannot abide such a variable to remain unresolved. The Xylos' statement, devoid of emotion, settled the debate. Fear, hope, superstition, all were irrelevant in the face of the unknown. An expedition would be dispatched. The greatest fleet the compact had ever assembled would travel to the edge of the galaxy to confront a ghost, to answer a question that had haunted them for 500,000 years. Who were the humans, and what had they become? A hush fell over the chamber as the decision solidified. A fleet of unprecedented scale would be gathered. It would not be a war fleet, not overtly. It would be a diplomatic and scientific expedition, but one armed with the full might of the compact. For they were approaching not just a dead system, but the cradle of a legend, and no one knew if that legend was a sleeping giant or a vengeful specter. As the delegates began to murmur amongst themselves, the Cathar Imperator remained silent, his multifaceted eyes still fixed on the pulsing blue light. He remembered the ancient texts, the warnings passed down from his ancestors who had fought a brief, brutal border skirmish with the humans in the twilight of their age. The humans had not been defeated. They had simply stopped fighting. They had withdrawn, their fleets vanishing back into their own territory without explanation, leaving the Cathar fleet battered, confused, and deeply, deeply unsettled. It was not a victory the Cathar had earned, but a mercy they had been granted. And that, more than any legend of their ferocity, was what the Imperator truly feared. He feared the calm, unknowable calculus of a species that could hold the power of utter victory in its grasp, and choose instead to simply walk away. The journey to the Sol system was a pilgrimage into silence. The compact fleet, a breathtaking armada of living crystal ships, biomechanical leviathans, and vessels of pure, woven light, slipped through the folds of hyperspace, emerging into the desolate, stardusted void of the Orion Arm. The space here felt different. It was older, quieter, emptier. The vibrant hum of the Galactic. Icor was a distant memory, replaced by a profound and unsettling stillness. Before them, the Star Sol was a modest, unassuming yellow dwarf, a far cry from the brilliant, massive stars that anchored the core worlds of the compact. It seemed an unfitting hearth for a species of such galactic renown. The system itself was cloaked, not in a conventional energy shield that could be measured and breached, but in something far more subtle. It was a distortion in spacetime itself, a gentle but absolute warping of reality that made their most advanced sensors return nonsensical, paradoxical readings. The fleet was forced to decelerate to sublight speeds, to approach the system with the caution of a creature entering the lair of a slumbering god. Admiral Kalen, a Cathar of high lineage and a veteran of 100 campaigns, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the indomitable Will. The viewscreen before him showed not the clear, crisp image of space he was accustomed to, but a wavering, dreamlike vista, as if he were looking at the system through a lens of heated air. The star itself seemed to shimmer, and the planets, when they could be resolved at all, appeared to drift in and out of phase with reality. His bridge crew, a collection of the finest minds from a dozen species, worked in hushed, focused silence, their voices a low murmur of technical jargon and expressions of disbelief. Every instrument they had, every theory of physics they held to be absolute was failing them. "Report," Kalen's voice was a low growl, the traditional Cathar sign of deep concentration. His science officer, a lithe, multi-limbed being from a world of perpetual twilight, turned from her console, her large, dark eyes wide with a mixture of awe and professional frustration. "Admiral, the readings are impossible. The gravitational fields are stable, yet the light from the star is bending in ways that violate general relativity. The temporal readings are even more disturbing. It is as if the entire system is in a state of quantum superposition. Time is not flowing in a linear fashion here." "It is braided." She hesitated, searching for an analogy. "Imagine a river that flows both upstream and downstream simultaneously. We are attempting to navigate a temporal paradox." Kalen's mandibles clicked together, a gesture of deep unease. "And the signal? It emanates from the third planet. The source is clear, unwavering. It has not changed its message or its intensity since we entered the system. But the carrier wave, it is not electromagnetic. It is not gravitational. It appears to be a modulated stream of chronotons. They are sending a message through time itself." A wave of disquiet washed over the bridge. Time manipulation was the holy grail of every advanced civilization, a theoretical impossibility that had been relegated to the realm of myth. To weaponize it was unthinkable. To use it as a simple medium for communication was a display of technological mastery so profound it bordered on the divine. The humans, it seemed, had not just broken the rules of physics, they had rewritten the entire book. As the fleet crept further into the system, past the orbits of the gas giants, they began to encounter the first signs of the system's guardians. They were not ships in the conventional sense. They were vast, silent structures, geometric impossibilities that hung in the void like sculptures of frozen spacetime. They were octahedrons that contained swirling nebulae, Mobius strips that rotated in 4 dimensions, and spheres of perfect blackness that absorbed all light and sensor probes. They were inert, silent, and utterly impassive. They did not respond to hails. They did not power up weapons. They simply were. And yet their presence was a more potent deterrent than any fleet of warships. They were a passive defense, a statement of power so absolute that it had no need for aggression. They were like the silent, unmoving sentinels of a pharaoh's tomb, their very existence a warning to those who would disturb the slumber of kings. The Gethar emissary, its collective consciousness projected into a shimmering, humanoid form of light on Kalen's bridge, conveyed a sense of profound reverence. "They are not defenses, Admiral. They are markers. They are art. They are a message in themselves. The message is, we are beyond your comprehension. Proceed with humility or do not proceed at all." Kalen felt a grudging respect. The Cathar way was one of overt strength, of massive fleets and overwhelming firepower. This was different. It was the quiet confidence of a species that had no need to prove its power, for it was as intrinsic to them as the space they occupied. He gave the order to proceed, to move deeper into this web of impossibility, toward the source of the signal, the third planet, Earth. The world that came into view on the main screen was a jewel of impossible beauty. It was a vibrant sphere of deep blues, swirling whites, and rich, verdant greens. It was alive, impossibly, miraculously alive. The Compact's historical archives, based on probes sent hundreds of thousands of years ago, had described a world that was already in a state of ecological collapse, its atmosphere choked with industrial pollutants, its oceans turning acidic. The projections had been clear. Within a few millennia, the planet would be a barren, toxic wasteland. Yet the world before them was a paradise, a thriving, perfect biosphere that pulsed with a vitality so potent it could almost be felt across the void. It was as if the intervening 500,000 years of decay had been reversed, as if time itself had been commanded to heal the world's wounds. And then they saw the fleet, It was not a fleet in orbit as they had expected. It was the orbit itself. Encircling the planet was a ring, a structure of such immense scale and delicate, filigreed beauty that it beggared description. It was not solid, but composed of countless individual components, trillions upon trillions of them, each one a vessel of some kind, all linked together in a complex, shimmering lattice that caught the sunlight like a web of spun diamond. The ships were of myriad designs, from sleek, needle-nosed explorers to vast, city-sized arc ships. They were silent, their energy signatures dormant, their hulls gleaming as if they had been polished only moments ago. It was a fleet of ghosts, a perfectly preserved armada waiting for a command that had not been given for 500,000 years. And at the heart of this ring, at a single, mathematically perfect point, a light pulsed, the source of the signal. As the compact fleet approached, a single vessel detached itself from the ring. It was a small ship by galactic standards, a simple, elegant ovoid of pearlescent white. It moved without any visible means of propulsion, gliding through the void with a silent, effortless grace. It came to a stop before the indomitable will, its size dwarfed by the Cathar flagship, yet it possessed a presence, an aura of quiet authority that made the massive warship seem clumsy and brutish by comparison. "They are hailing us," the communications officer reported, his voice trembling slightly. "Audio only, no visual." Kalen drew himself up to his full height, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the soft light of the bridge. On screen. The bridge fell silent. The view screen, which had shown the small white ship against the backdrop of the Earth and its impossible ring of vessels, now showed only a simple, elegant waveform, a visual representation of the audio signal. And then a voice spoke. It was calm, clear, and resonant, a voice that was neither male nor female, old nor young. It spoke in the lingua franca of the compact, a language it could not have possibly known, yet it spoke it with a perfect, unaccented fluency. "Greetings, travelers, I am the custodian. On behalf of my creators, I welcome you to the Sol system. You have come a long way. We have been expecting you." The voice was a machine, Kalen realized. A synthetic intelligence. There was no emotion in it, no inflection, yet it was not the cold, flat monotone of a simple computer. It was possessed of a deep and profound serenity, a patience that seemed as vast and as ancient as the stars themselves. The Imperator's fears, it seemed, had been misplaced. There were no vengeful humans here, no hidden empire waiting to reclaim the galaxy. There was only a machine, a lonely sentinel standing guard over a dead civilization. A wave of relief, mingled with a strange sense of disappointment, washed over the Cathar admiral. "I am Admiral Kalen of the Cathar Imperium, commanding the expeditionary fleet of the Galactic Compact," he replied, his voice a formal, guttural rasp. "We have come in response to your signal. We have come to learn the fate of your creators, the fate of the humans." The waveform on the screen pulsed gently. "The fate of the humans is a long and complex story," the custodian's voice replied, its calm unwavering. "It is not a story that can be told in a single transmission. It is a story that must be shown. We have prepared for your arrival. We invite you to send a delegation. Come aboard. See for yourselves what has become of humanity's legacy. There is no danger here. We are not your enemy. We are the inheritors of a promise." A debate, swift and intense, erupted among the Compact's leadership, connected by a secure neural link. The Cathar Imperator, his voice a torrent of suspicion from half a galaxy away, urged caution, warning of a trap. The Gthar, however, felt the truth in the custodian's words, a sincerity so pure it was beyond deception. Voxel Primus, ever the logician, calculated the probabilities. A trap was possible but seemed inefficient. The display of power they had already witnessed suggested that if this entity wished them harm, it could have annihilated their fleet from a distance without any need for subterfuge. The potential reward of knowledge, it concluded, outweighed the risk. The decision was made. A delegation would be sent. It would be led by Admiral Kalen, representing the military might and skepticism of the Compact, the Gthar emissary representing its spiritual and empathic heart, and a Xylos scholar, a being of pure intellect, to analyze and record. They would board the small white ship and be taken to the ring, to the heart of the mystery, to learn the fate of the long-lost humans. The interior of the human vessel was a temple of minimalism. It was a single, vast, spherical chamber, its walls a soft, glowing white that seemed to have no source. There was no visible technology, no control panels, no consoles. In the center of the chamber, a simple, elegant pedestal of the same white material rose from the floor. Upon it rested a sphere of what looked like liquid light, its surface swirling with gentle, incandescent patterns. This, they surmised, was the physical interface of the custodian. As the delegation entered, the voice filled the chamber, seeming to emanate from the very air around them. "Welcome," the custodian said, its serene voice a stark contrast to the Cathar admiral's tense, rigid posture. "Please do not be alarmed. The environment is perfectly calibrated to your individual biologies. You are safe here." Kalen surveyed the chamber, his warrior's instincts on high alert. He saw no weapons, no guards, no hidden defenses. There was only a profound and unnerving sense of peace. It was more disquieting than any display of aggression. The Gethar emissary, a shimmering form of light, drifted toward the central pedestal, its emotional field radiating a sense of wonder and curiosity. "You are beautiful. Your consciousness is vast. We can feel it. It is like an ocean, calm and deep." "I am a reflection of my creators," the custodian replied. "They valued beauty in simplicity and elegance in function. I am what they left behind, a library, a guardian, a memory." The Xylo's scholar, its crystalline form capturing and refracting the soft light of the chamber, spoke in its precise, harmonic tones. "Your technological level is a paradox. Your ability to manipulate spacetime and chronotons is beyond our theoretical models. Yet the underlying energy signatures of this vessel are based on principles we would consider archaic. It is as if a primitive steam engine were capable of interstellar travel. It is illogical." "Logic is a function of perspective," the custodian said. "My creators did not follow a linear path of technological development. They pursued knowledge in all directions at once. They understood that the universe did not operate on a single set of principles, but on an infinite symphony of interconnected laws. They mastered the simple as well as the complex. They could build a starship with a fusion reactor, or they could fold space with a thought. They chose the path of least resistance, the most elegant solution. Often the oldest principles are the most elegant." The small ship moved without any sensation of movement, gliding through the silent ranks of the ghost fleet. Through the translucent walls of the chamber, the delegation could see the vessels up close. They were magnificent, each one a work of art, their hulls inscribed with intricate patterns and script that no one in the compact could decipher. They were not warships. They were arcships, science vessels, exploratory craft, even mobile art installations. It was a fleet built not for conquest, but for discovery and preservation. "Where are they?" Kalen finally asked, his voice rough with impatience. "The humans, what happened to them? Did they die out? Was there a plague, a civil war?" "They did not die," the custodian replied, its voice taking on a new depth, a hint of something that was not quite emotion but a profound and resonant significance. "They evolved. They transcended. They chose to leave this plane of existence." The statement hung in the air, a concept so immense it was difficult to grasp. The Gethar pulsed with understanding. "We have theorized of such a thing. A civilization reaching a point of technological and spiritual maturity where they could shed their physical forms and become beings of pure energy, of pure consciousness." "That is a simplistic but not entirely inaccurate analogy," the custodian affirmed. "They discovered that this universe, this physical reality, is but one layer of a much larger, more complex existence. They were like creatures living at the bottom of an ocean who had spent their entire history studying the water, only to one day realize there was a surface, and beyond it, a sky and stars they had never imagined. They did not die. They were born." The Cathar admiral was stunned into silence. All the legends, all the fears, all the millennia of speculation, all of it had been wrong. The humans had not been conquerors who had destroyed themselves. They had been pioneers who had outgrown their cradle. The white ship docked with the ring, merging seamlessly with a vast, crystalline structure at its heart. The delegation was led into a space that was not a corridor but a world. It was a simulated environment of breathtaking fidelity, a forest of towering green trees under a warm yellow sun, the air filled with the scent of damp earth and the sound of birdsong. The delegation stood on a path of soft grass, their alien forms a stark contrast to the impossibly terrestrial scene. "This is a memory," the custodian's voice explained, now seeming to come from the wind in the trees, from the rustling of the leaves. "One of trillions stored within this fleet which you see as a collection of ships. It is not a fleet. It is a library, the great library of Earth. Each ship is a book, each system a chapter. We have preserved the sum total of their knowledge, their art, their history, and their biology. We have preserved the memory of their world as it was and as it could have been." They were led through other memories. A bustling, vibrant city of soaring, elegant towers, filled with the holographic ghosts of humans laughing and talking. A deep, silent ocean where great, gentle creatures swam in the sun-dappled water. A stark, beautiful desert under a sky filled with a billion stars. They saw human art, heard their music, a symphony of such complex emotion, joy, sorrow, love, despair, that it brought the Gethar's light form to a state of ecstatic weeping. The Cathar Admiral Kalen found himself profoundly moved, his rigid warrior's discipline shaken by the sheer, unadulterated beauty and emotional depth of this vanished race. They were not the monsters of his people's legends. They were poets and scientists and dreamers. In a chamber that simulated a vast, quiet museum, they were shown the final stages of human history. They saw how they had healed their damaged world, using technology that worked in harmony with nature, not against it. They saw how they had dismantled their weapons of war, turning their swords into plowshares on a planetary scale. They saw how they had united as a single global consciousness, ending poverty, disease, and conflict not through force, but through a shared understanding and a collective will to be better. They achieved peace, the custodian stated, a true and lasting peace, and in that peace they found the silence necessary to hear the universe's deeper truths. That is when they discovered the signal. This caught the attention of every member of the delegation. "The signal?" the Xylos scholar asked. "The signal you are broadcasting?" "No," the custodian replied. "A different signal, an older one. It is the reason I was created. It is the reason my creators departed. And it is the reason I have awakened and called you here." The museum simulation dissolved, replaced by the stark reality of the central chamber. In the middle of the room, a new holographic display appeared. It was a map, but not of their galaxy. It showed the vast, empty chasm of intergalactic space. And from that void, from a point so distant it was almost beyond comprehension, a signal was depicted. It was not a communication. It was a pattern, a wave of cosmic radiation that was moving, slowly but inexorably, toward their galaxy. "My creators detected this 500,000 years ago," the custodian said, its voice losing its serenity for the first time, replaced by a tone of profound, ancient gravity. "It is not a natural phenomenon. It is the wake of something vast and terrible moving through the intergalactic void, a force that consumes." The display zoomed in on the signal's path. It showed other galaxies that had been in its way. The light from those galaxies was shown to flicker, and then one by one to die. It was a wave of extinction, a darkness that was swallowing the universe, one galaxy at a time. "We do not know what it is," the custodian continued. "A civilization of unimaginable power, a natural law of the cosmos we do not understand, a life form that feeds on the energy of stars and civilizations. My creators could not be certain, but they knew it was coming, and they knew it was the ultimate threat to all life." A cold dread, deeper than any fear of war or galactic politics, settled upon the delegation. This was an existential threat on a scale they had never conceived. "Why did they leave?" Kalen asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Why did they not stay and fight?" "You misunderstand," the custodian said, and now the serenity returned to its voice, but it was a different kind of serenity. It was not the peace of a librarian, but the calm resolve of a warrior. "They did not flee. They went to confront it." The full, breathtaking truth of the humans' disappearance finally dawned on them. Their transcendence was not an act of spiritual navel-gazing. It was a strategic necessity. They had evolved themselves into beings of pure energy, beings capable of traversing the intergalactic void in order to meet this threat head-on, to fight a battle on a scale that physical beings could not even comprehend. They had abandoned their home, their bodies, their very reality, not in surrender, but as the ultimate act of courage. "This fleet," the custodian explained, gesturing to the infinite ring of ships that surrounded them, "is not just a library, it is an arsenal. The knowledge contained within it of physics, of biology, of space-time manipulation is the legacy my creators left behind for the younger races of this galaxy. It is their gift to you, their hope for you." The signal that the custodian had broadcast, the one that had drawn the compact fleet across the galaxy, was not a greeting. It was an alarm. "The echo of the approaching threat has finally reached the edges of this galaxy." The custodian's voice resonated through the chamber, filled with the weight of 500,000 years of silent, patient waiting. "The first signs are beginning to manifest. Subtle energy fluctuations at the galactic rim, the dimming of distant star clusters, the things your astronomers have been noticing but have been unable to explain. The time for waiting is over. My purpose is now fulfilled. I was created to be the guardian of this knowledge, to preserve it until the day you were mature enough to receive it, and to recognize the true nature of the coming night." The Gethar's light form shimmered with a terrible, beautiful understanding. They sacrificed themselves for us, for a galaxy of species they had never even met. They did not see a galaxy of different species, the custodian corrected gently. They saw a galaxy of life, and to them all life was precious. They understood a truth that your compact is only just beginning to grasp, that in a cold and indifferent universe, the only thing that truly matters is consciousness. The only imperative is to protect the flame of awareness from the encroaching dark. Admiral Kalen, the hardened Cathar warrior, stood humbled. His people's entire history, their conquests, their pride, their ancient traditions, it all seemed so small, so insignificant in the face of this revelation. The humans, the species they had feared and misunderstood for so long, had not been their rivals. They had been their silent, unseen guardians. Their half-million-year absence had not been an act of abandonment, but the longest and most profound act of selfless duty in the history of the cosmos. The Xylos scholar processed the information with the cold, clear light of pure reason. The probability of our survival, even with this knowledge, is statistically low. Probability is not a guarantee of failure, the custodian replied. It is merely a measure of difficulty. My creators faced the same probabilities. They chose to act anyway. They chose hope over despair. That, more than any technology or science, was their greatest strength. It is the final piece of knowledge I have to share with you. The delegation returned to the indomitable will in a state of profound and altered silence. The story they brought back to the compact was not one of ghosts and dead empires, but of gods and saviors, of a revelation that would shatter their understanding of the universe and their place within it. The fleet of the Galactic Compact, which had arrived as a cautious, heavily armed expedition, now looked upon the silent, beautiful ring of human ships with a new and profound reverence. It was not a tomb. It was an inheritance. It was an ark of knowledge, a fortress of hope, and a call to arms. In the grand chamber of the conclave, the obsidian dais was silent once more. The pulsing blue light of the Sol system on the holographic map now glowed with a different meaning. It was not a mystery to be feared, but a beacon to be followed. The Cathar Imperator, having heard the delegation's report, stood before the assembly, his chitinous form rigid not with aggression, but with a new and solemn purpose. For 500,000 years we have lived in the shadow of a species we thought was our inferior, his voice rasped, carrying a weight of history and newfound humility. We built our compact on the ashes of their supposed failure. We were wrong. They were not a failure. They were the vanguard. They were the silent sentinels standing watch while we, the children of the galaxy, learned to walk. Now a great darkness comes, a darkness they went to face alone. He paused, his multifaceted eyes sweeping across the chamber, meeting the gaze of every delegate. They will not be alone any longer. The chamber, once filled with tension and suspicion, now resonated with a single, unified purpose. The ancient rivalries, the political squabbles, the cultural divides, all of it melted away in the face of a truth so vast and a threat so absolute. The human fleet, the great library of Earth, was not advanced simply because of its technology. It was advanced because of the wisdom it represented. The philosophy of unity and selfless sacrifice that had built it. It was a legacy that had waited patiently for its inheritors to be ready. The final scene is not one of council chambers, but of the silent, star-strewn void. The great, beautiful ships of the Galactic Compact turn as one, their myriad forms and technologies now joined in a shared destiny. They move toward the shimmering, diamond-like ring of the human fleet, not as conquerors or investigators, but as students, as allies, as inheritors. The small, pearlescent ovoid of the custodian's vessel leads them, a guide into a new age. Together, the fleets of the children of the galaxy and the legacy of their long-lost parents turn their prows away from the familiar, comforting light of the galactic core and face the cold, empty darkness of the intergalactic void. They point themselves toward a distant, unseen foe, toward a war for the very soul of the universe. The silence of the humans has been broken, and in its place is a new voice, a chorus of 1,000 worlds, united by a 500,000-year-old promise, ready to face the long night together.